Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stephen Liu, and welcome to the podcast Getting Naked with Happiness. Getting Naked with Happiness is about sharing personal journeys that will help us to ask better questions so that we can gain clarity from these questions in building our successful and meaningful well being. So please join me, and I hope you enjoy the show. My first guest is Winifred. And Winifred is a good friend, and she is a couples therapist and specializes in working with marriages and relationships. And she's also the director of Weave Private Limited and also a therapist with Winslow Promises Clinic. And Winifred has spent many years of her life dedicated to help couples to develop better well-being, foster positive communication, and also, to derive more meaning and happiness in their lives. And of course, Winifred is a very talented individual, and she has an inspiring story to share. And hopefully today she will be able to share her story with everybody, and we can learn to add these skills to our happiness toolkits. So without further ado, allow me to introduce and welcome Winifred Ling.
Hello, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Stefan, for inviting me for this wonderful podcast.
So a backtrack to how we met. We met because we're in the same industry, and we met at the School of Positive Psychology, and we come together and learn about how this well-being could help. Mm-hmm. And I also know that you're in the field of helping couples and to get back on track in their marriage or in their relationship, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it comes to the first question that I would like to ask you today is that, given your personal experience and training and exposure, could you share one daily habit or practice that contributes to your own personal well-being first?
Sure. Okay, the daily practice that I have is actually gratitude practice, the counting of blessings. And this is a practice that I have been doing for more than 10 years now. I used to do it as a child, and then I kind of stopped it because you learn about counting your blessings and stuff like that. But ever since I was ill, that practice has helped me tremendously to remember the good that I have, even when I was going through a really difficult time. So even now, when I work with difficult clients or when I have challenging days, I fall back into that practice to help myself to elevate my positive emotions.
Wow. I could hear from the tone of your voice about how there's some part about a story that was inside there. Could you tell a bit more about that story if you could share?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually a stroke survivor, and that comes as a surprise to many people because outwardly I do look quite normal. And the reason I have this stroke was because I have a rare illness called the moya disease. And it is a disease that affects the brain, the blood flow in the brain. And what happened to me about 15 years ago was that I had a mini stroke, or the medical term is transient ischemic attack. So what happened is that I would have numbness, I had slurred speech, and I was not able to lift my hands for a short period of time. So I was very lucky because it was not permanent. I would recover my functioning within within half an hour or so. But it was quite a terrifying thing because you never know which episode will actually lead you to a permanent damage in that sense.
Wow. If I could just hold on for a while to absorb and take all that in, because thanks for sharing. Thanks for taking courage to share this. As I am learning along the way, you said something moya disease, mm-hmm. and that is connected to a stroke experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you be able to share a bit more about your stroke experience?
Okay. The first time I had my stroke was in year 2004, and I actually had no impairment in the functioning. But when they did the scan, they found that there was an infarct, meaning there's some kind of there's a loss of a blood flow. And subsequently, through many various investigations, I actually spent 2004 in and out of the hospital 5 times, and that was a really challenging year. to cut the long story short, I had to go for a brain surgery in 2007, and I had to do 2 brain surgeries because moya disease actually affect both sides of the blood flow, the arteries in the brain. And so I had the first surgery done in July 2007, and the second one was on September 2007, the same year. And unfortunately, after my second surgery, I actually suffered quite a significant stroke that affected my functioning. I was not able to read and write. I also lost my working memory. I lost my right visual field, and that was pretty challenging.
Second stroke.
So I had multiple mini transient ischemic stroke that didn't cause the loss of the functioning. But this last one that I had after the surgery was actually permanent.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that experience. Yeah. And I could not say I relate, but I went through a personal experience witnessing a friend going through the stroke, and this will be another story for another day.
Yeah.
And I could say that I collapsed mentally and emotionally at a point. But having said this, will you be able to share a little bit with us about what's it like?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so when I had that stroke, I was 31 years old, and while I was in the hospital, there was actually no rehab program for me because they have like rehab stuff for people who have like paralyzed or they needed physical or movement and all that, the therapy. So I was like neither here nor there. So I actually had to like develop my own rehab program to train myself to be able to read and write again. Initially my handwriting was like back to kindergarten. I couldn't even really draw the handwriting and stuff like that. And I was not able to read the book at first too, and my memory was really bad. I had to like keep writing like, okay, this is Ward 48, base 3, because otherwise I wouldn't remember where I was. So that was, and I think I mean during that time I had a CD player. Do you know about CD player?
Yes, CD player.
So yeah, my generation, right? CD player, and I had no idea how to replace the battery in that CD player. That was how the deficit that I had and suffered at that point in time. So eventually, I was discharged, and then I think my fiance was very resourceful, so he got me to do like a brain training game. So I started doing a lot of the brain training game, and I also started to type, or like I think Facebook just started around that time too. So I went on Facebook and started to do the typing and like get connected with people. And I think within 2 months, I actually regained quite a lot of my functioning back. So I was able to write more normally and all that. But sadly, my right visual field, the peripheral visual field, never recovered. So even right now, I don't have a right visual field, and as a result, I'm not a safe candidate for driving. Yeah, I'll have to be driven.
Well, that's a good part about being driven and being a passenger.
So thank God for Grab car and and Gojek and things like that.
Yeah, so for those who are listening in, of course, we in Singapore we have Grab and Gojek. This would be the community sharing, co-sharing app. And of course, it's alike to Uber, but Singapore, Uber has left us and been bought over by Grab. So coming back to what you just shared, Winifred, about if I could go back to the part, because this might be useful to the listeners, of when the stroke happened at the very start, were there any signs that you could pick up? Because maybe the reason why I'm asking this question is that maybe for those out there who have not experienced or encountered stroke, it could just happen to people that you know, and maybe some of these early warning signs is important.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. And there were actually some warning signs. Like the first stroke that I had happened in April 2004, And a few months before that, I remember clearly I was at coffee club, so it was that vivid. I was at coffee club having a meal with some friends, and I realized there was a moment where I momentarily was, something just snapped, like I was not able to be present. I felt like I was in the room, but I was not really there. And that was the very first time when something quite unusual happened to me. But then, I recovered about a couple of minutes, like about a few minutes later, and so I didn't give too much thoughts about it. And I suppose the denial system was there, and to protect me, I just ignore it. It's better not to just pay attention to it. It could be just nothing. Subsequently, in April, I had maybe one or two more episodes that happened, but they're all very brief. Like I had one particular episode whereby I was not able to articulate certain word. I think I was in church, and we were like in church, and we had to say something. I wanted to say 1, 2, 3, and it came out with like 4, 5, 6 kind of a thing. So it was a bit of a gibberish. And again, I panicked for a moment, but then I recovered quickly after that. And so I knew, actually in my heart, I knew that something was wrong, but I just weren't ready to face it. So on the fateful day, I actually went to see doctor. I actually saw 2 doctors that day, because I feel that maybe it's time to just find out what's going on. I saw somebody at my hospital. I was working at Institute of Mental Health at that time. So I went to the staff clinic, and then the doctor there said it possibly could be TIA, transient ischemic attack. At that time I didn't know what it was. And then after that, I went home and I decided to see a GP. And I thought that maybe if I see the GP, he could get me like a scan, to do a scan to find out. But unfortunately, that GP reassured me prematurely that there was nothing, because I was only 28. He didn't think that it was likely that I would have a stroke. And I think that's a lesson that we all have to learn, that, it doesn't mean that you're young and you won't have a stroke. So that's a message that I also want to share with other people, that when you feel that there's something wrong with your health, do not be afraid to pursue it and to find out, because, it could cost your life. Okay, so that evening, I remember my sister was coming home from work, and I was about to get ready to go out perhaps. And then that's when I really experienced a slurring of speech. And I knew I had to go to the emergency at that point in time, because it is becoming really real. It's no longer my imagination.
Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned something about TIA,
Yeah.
Transient
ischemic attack.
Ischemic attack.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more?
So that's really like, in layman term, is mini stroke. So you had stroke-like symptoms, and then it is transient because you typically will recover within 24 hours. And I'm a lot more fortunate than that, because usually for me, I'll recover within like 15, 20 minutes. So like the very first time when I went to the emergency, I had the slurred speech. I think we got a cab to go to the A&E, and by the time I got to A&E, I was perfectly normal, but they took it seriously, and they had to like really do the investigation. Yeah, so usually you recover from it within like a 24 hours period.
Okay. I can't help to think about my experience encountering the friend who went through his own stroke experience. Yeah, and well, I think that there's so many things that we need to know and pay attention to, because when that happened, I was just completely shocked. I didn't know what to do.
And I imagine.
Yeah, so I guess that we really need to recognize these signs to know that we need to respond and react quicker. Will you be able to, and after that, and after all this that has happened, what are some of afterthoughts, moving forward as recovering from all these events? What are your takeaway?
Okay. So something like what I've learned from it, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so there's so much that I've learned from it. I do not wish for anybody to go through it. I mean, sometimes I also wish that it didn't happen to me, but given that it has happened to me, I'm actually grateful for the experience, because I think that this experience has really changed me in some ways, in a very, very significant way. I used to be like a really ambitious go-getter person, like you can just drive yourself with different targets and with different goals that I want, and feel very empowered, and I would just pursue them. And I think that made me quite a hard person. But I think with this illness, the most important lesson is that you never really know when things will happen to you, and that you don't really know when whether and what you are made of. So I think this experience really helped me to realize the resilience that I have in myself. That even when I was going through a really, really hard time, I was able to maintain some level of calmness. And actually that's something that I'm really proud about as well. Like while I was going through the year where I have two surgeries and all that, most of my friends who came and visit me would say that I was actually cheerful. I wasn't like depressed, or I wasn't like, sad or anything like that. Bear in mind that I was sad, I was disappointed, but I just tried to focus on the good part of it, like the gratitude. So the gratitude really helped me to cope better, to continue to be cheerful, and to see that as an occasion whereby I can also learn something from it. And I was really, really grateful, because I was in a ward full of people who were bedridden, they couldn't really get out. They were just like in tubes, and I was this young person in that stroke ward, being able to get up and walk around. And I mean, like outwardly, I looked perfectly normal. So as I was looking at them, I realized how fortunate I was that I could actually get treatment first before I ended up like being in the worst state. So that sort of like, so gratitude becomes my companion. It really opened my eyes, and it helped me to just treasure every little thing in that sense, like my life. It's a second chance in life. I appreciate my friends better. I find out who are the ones who really care for me, and I have so many people who rally around me, that I figured that I must be a good person. Sometimes you need that kind of validation and say, yeah, something must be right about me that people care. Because I know that there are like different churches, friends who got their friends to pray for me, like strangers who do that. And I was really, really thankful for how they were like galvanizing all this effort to support me. So yeah, one would be me being less in control. I mean, like I was able to surrender and allow myself to see my own resilience. And then I think it is also a huge lesson in trusting in God, because I think that moment just before I was rolled into the operating theatre, it was really just me and God, and I had no idea what would be the outcome, because it's like a pretty serious surgery. It's a brain surgery, and it's so delicate, anything could have happened. No one, I mean, like my loved ones, they were there, but nobody could like went into that room with me. It was just myself. And I think to have that, to believe, to have a God whom I believe in, really helped me to be comforted and to surrender and to say that, okay, things are going to be okay, and even if things are not okay, we'll deal with it. Okay, and I think being ill also teach me to be more compassionate, and I think that's when I really learned about self-compassion, because I'm also a very, very harsh person towards myself. I have high expectation. I drive myself crazy. I'm my harshest critic. And so I have to learn to extend compassion to myself. And in so doing, I think I have a lot more compassion and empathy towards other people as well. Because I think when I'm able to extend that to me, then I can do that better with other people as well. And I feel that helped me to become an even more effective therapist, to be able to really understand and to be genuine about it towards people whom I see.
Wow. I mean, this is not the first conversation that we had. We have spoke many times, but every time when I speak to you, I get to learn more insights. And yes, we have spoke about your stroke experience, but this time around, I think I have learned so much more on the part whereby not being able to write, going back to
Yeah.
that stage.
Yeah, and so that was really important because that's my bread and butter, right? I have to be able to read, I have to be able to write and produce and all that. So it was pretty difficult.
I like the part whereby when you told me about how this whole experience has made you more compassionate and to award you with more high level of empathy so that you can connect better with people who are suffering.
Yeah.
And I guess that it goes out to a lot of people out there who are suffering or who were suffering and who are still suffering. I guess that the good part about it is that when you suffer or when we suffer, we also tap into our consciousness of human emotions.
Yeah.
And this is the part that makes us tap into our compassionate instincts, and we use the same instinct to connect with other people. And even though we can come from different places and we hide our faces behind technology, and many people are saying that connections are dropping, we are more disconnected, but on the very same vein that these emotions are the one that connect with people around us.
Yeah.
And I think that I would like to ask in a way that, so based on how the way you bounce back from your suffering and you felt that you have increased your empathy and your compassionate intelligence or instinct, will you be able to share a bit more about how you have bring this back to your practice as a couple therapist?
So, couple therapists, just a very, very quick story. The couple therapists come about, I didn't intend to become a couple therapist, and he actually found me in that way. So, in my first year of marriage, we had quite a lot of issues, and that was the catalyst for me to start reading up more about relationship because I needed to fix my marriage, for lack of a better word, right? And in the process of doing so, I discovered the beauty of it, and I feel that many people are actually suffering, and even those people who are not divorced or something, they're maybe almost as many people are going through a really hard time of like lack of connection and all that. And I wanted to really be an instrument in that sense to reach out and to talk about empowerment, to instruct or teach about like how you can develop certain skills in relationship, like for example communication, emotional regulation is a big one, and as well as like empathy and like what else? Let me see. And skills, conflict management. Conflict management is really important.
Well, if I could just add a bit more of what you just said. You say emotion regulation.
Yes.
So emotion regulation is the process to be aware of the emotions. And can you maybe share a bit more with the listeners of can you give an example of emotion regulation?
Sure. For example, how maybe you might know that maybe it's in your own relationship where one partner has difficulty in fighting. They'll tell you, no, I don't want to fight because, it's no point, it's too stressful and all that. Most of the time, people who do not want to engage in fight, they have issues with emotional regulation. And the main reason is because they are not able to regulate. It's very uncomfortable. It creates a lot of discomfort. And so they have to shut down. And therefore, you have people who are stonewalling. You've heard of stonewalling?
Stonewalling. Okay.
So you just build a stone wall around you because you are not able to receive all the emotions. Typically it's guys, but there are some female who also stonewall. So it's not limited to just guy, but most of the time it is guys. Okay. So then in this case, if you have emotional regulation, then you will know that it is okay to sit with negative emotion. Actually, that's one of the key things that every person should learn, especially young children. So if you have parents out there, I would really encourage you to build an emotional vocabulary for your children, and also to teach them how to sit with negative emotions. So it's not just about being happy and all that. And what do I mean by that is do allow them to feel disappointment, or sometimes say no to them. They're not going to like it. And your job is not to make them happy all the time, but kind of to teach them to be comfortable with negative emotion. Because when you have such training, you will not learn to avoid it. So we all avoid our negative emotion by perhaps drinking alcohol, or we do drugs, or we maybe involve ourselves in like our work, or like partying and things like that. These are all coping mechanisms that actually help you to manage the discomfort that you're feeling.
Well, Winifred, I could say when you use the word stonewalling, I could immediately connect back to some of my personal earlier experiences when I was a younger male. Yeah, I'm still youngish. We're all
Okay,
still
yes,
youngish
we are youngish.
at heart. Yeah, I can distinctly recall times whereby I stonewall because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I was so overwhelmed, but right now, because I have the vocabulary to talk about it, to express my emotions, but back then when I was younger, as a young adult, there were episodes whereby I felt a huge tsunami of emotions rising within me, and mentally I collapsed.
Yeah.
At the point, I was confused. I was filled with intense frustration or even anger.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And there were people involved, and I didn't know whether I should proceed with my emotions, or I think what was very enticing was to shout, and a few times I did lose my temper and I shouted. And there were some times that I didn't want to shout because I know some part of it might be wrong, and then I started to hide away. And so is that an example of stonewalling?
Stonewalling more is somewhat, but not exactly. Stonewalling is more when you shut down.
Yeah.
So you stop hearing. So this is more in the context of like a fight or an argument, whereby all you in your mind, you are actually not there anymore. So your partner could be saying A, B, C, D, E, and you probably just hear A. So there's nothing, and then you look like you're not responding, and that will piss your partner off very, very much. They'll be like, are you listening or not? So that's more of the meaning of stonewalling. But I want to come back to what you were talking about, the tsunami of emotions and all that. I really like the word tsunami because I think that's how you feel like when you're overwhelmed, isn't it? So to talk about that, like what do we do when we are overwhelmed by emotions? Maybe the first thing to do is to remember that all emotions are acceptable. Okay, so that's the first step, to say that, okay, what is it that I'm feeling right now? So you start to name it. When you named it, you become less scary. Otherwise, you just have this overwhelming emotion in your body that you don't know what to do, and you think that you may be like having a panic attack or something like that. When you are able to name it and tell yourself that I'm safe, then your brain receives the message to calm down. All right? So I mean, like for listeners who are listening in and wondering about how do you manage this overwhelming emotion, is to take a deep breath, right? Mindfulness, to take a deep breath to ground yourself and to realize that, you are safe, and that maybe the brain, the thought is playing a havoc on your mind. And then we can start to pay attention to say, okay, do you want to pay attention to these thoughts or not? You could actually choose to not pay attention to them. And then gradually the feeling will actually come down, because emotions, it goes up and it comes down. And even if you don't do anything, it will eventually come down. It's just that you feel really, really awful about it. And therefore, it comes back to my point about emotional regulation. You need to be able to sit with difficult emotion. And that's a really, really important skills to have.
Thank you for saying that. I think that is such a great tip for what we can do when we meet difficult emotions. When you talk about these tips on how to manage emotions, I think the first part would be also having the awareness and the ability to recognize that it is happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, we have different sort of listeners in this program, but I want to just to nail it down, to refer it to the male audience, because I'm a man, and I think that it goes out to a lot for men out there, that sometimes when we experience difficult emotions, we avoid, we get triggered, or we just, as what Winifred said, we stonewall because we didn't know what to react.
Yeah, so the 3F, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. So the stonewall will belong to the third one.
The
You
freezing.
Freeze, yeah, the freezing.
And sometimes we do also freeze in fear because we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So we want to avoid a confrontation, or it's because that we don't know what's the best way forward, so we freeze. And well, this will be another topic for another day.
Sure.
I think there's so many things that we want to say, but I guess that a word out there to those who are still trying to improve their well-being, and we all are, that if you would like to have a quick understanding, so you can always try to be aware of your emotions, and as what Winifred has said, take a deep breath when you are in that space. Sometimes, taking that breath will bring your attention back to your body, and that mindfulness will be a quick reality check of where you are at.
Yeah, that's right. To be in the present moment, and when you're in the present moment, then it grounds you as well.
Okay, so if you could dispense an advice to people who are searching for meaning and happiness, what would that be?
Okay, I like to propose something which probably may not be as conventional. I like to say that happiness is actually not an emotional state. It's not so much about like, oh yeah, I'm happy, all the smiley faces and all that. But happiness is actually a decision that we make. We choose whether we want to be happy or not in certain circumstances. And there's actually studies that shows that, like in the pie of happiness, 50% of your pie actually is according to your set point, like, genetically, whether you are generally happy or not and all that. So that's half of the pie. And 10% is circumstances. So only 10% circumstances refer to be like, oh, when I'm richer, when I have like my first car, or my first Prada bag, or whatever, and things like that. That actually only contribute 10%. And what happened to the 40% that is left over, right? So 40%, and here is the good news, my dear listener. The 40% is what you can do. How do you decide to actually be happy? So like some example would be like, I can choose when I am feeling a little bit down, I want happiness, I can call out a good friend, and then we can go have like a heart-to-heart conversation, like what I'm having with Stefan right now. Or you could like maybe go for a walk, cuddle with your dogs, or like do something. You can actually do something to create that happiness. Do something that can help you to be more grateful. I always like to tap into gratitude because I think that is quite a sure way to help you to uplift your mood, because when you realize that you are so much more fortunate, then that will help you to also be more focused as well. But I'm also mindful but it should not be a guilt thing, So I'm quite quick to jump in and say that, you don't have to like do gratitude and say that I need to feel good after I do my gratitude. And that's not going to work either. It's not going to really work. So do things that has already helped you. Like if you're physical, go for a run, maybe that might help you to feel better. The end point is that you can choose what you want to do about it. And I think that's the great news about happiness. It's not so much about the state. The state is just part of it. But what is in your hand is the choices that you make in order to achieve that happiness or joy or like that positive emotion.
Thank you for saying that, Winifred. And so we have learned today, happiness is indeed a choice. And we can always do something about it if we want to exercise that choice. So thank you, Winifred, for coming today and spending your time. And for those who are listening right now, thank you for listening. And as you know that the podcast Getting Naked with Happiness is whereby I will invite happiness and well-being leaders and those people who have compelling stories to share and of how they have survived and bounced back from resilience and suffering. So if you have any comments, please share your comments in the Facebook page, Getting Naked with Happiness, and also on Instagram, #Getting Naked with Happiness. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I wish everyone a happy and fulfilling day and week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.